Welcome to the lABLEd podcast, a show about disability, illness and difference. I'm Lucy.
And I'm Alice.
And that's Lola.
Kaleidoscope identity, and this is who I'm meant to be. I'm just labelled me. I'm just labelled me.
Don't forget, in this episode, I might swear, Lucy might cry, and you can check out details of the trigger warnings on our website.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the lABLEd podcast. I am Lucy, and this is my co-host, Alice.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I was going to say my own name, but apparently
Sorry.
that's not allowed.
Should we do it again?
No, it's fine. It's just a little bit, does she take sugar?
Sorry, it's a cardinal sin. I do apologise. How are you, love? All right?
No, I don't take sugar. Yeah, I'm all right. I've been doing a lot, but for once in my life, not feeling hugely stressed out about it. I don't seem to know. I think I've just reached my limit of caring, and now I just don't care anymore. I'm just like, no, you know what? It'll work itself out.
I think we've had a bit of a role reversal in our lives because I am doing a lot and I'm still stressed. So, but hey ho, well, it's fine. My birthday is soon. It's all right. Everybody, calm down. It will be fine. But yes, good. I'm glad.
Right, your birthday will have been and gone by the time this comes out because
Yes,
we're
it will.
releasing this.
You are listening to me from the future. No, I will be 34. I'll be 34 when this episode comes out. 34. I mean, I know
It's not that bad.
No, I know, but I always think, like, age. I always think years that ended.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, years that ended in 4 or 5, they make you, because you're not like at the beginning of the decade and you're not near the end of it. You're just like in the middle. You're like on the top before you go down.
You are firmly in your 30s at this point.
Yeah, exactly. That's what makes me feel a bit about
You can't say I'm in my early 30s.
No.
You're very much in your 30s now.
Fine, though. It's all right. It's fine.
So when this episode does go out, at the minute we are recording and it is Olympics season, but when this episode goes out, it's going to be Paralympics season. So
Stand aside, ladies and gents.
us being a disability podcast, we thought we would milk that for all it was worth. And we've got a bit of a series of disabled sports people coming on, and I'm really excited because I'm a bit of a swimming fangirl. I'm really excited to have Liz Wright on the show with us today, everybody. Hi, Liz. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, Alice. Hi, Lucy. I'm really excited to be on the podcast. And I was laughing at you, Lucy. You're like, oh, I'm turning 34. I'm like, I turned 42 this year. You've got nothing on me.
Fine, you're all right. It's all right. So lovely to have you on the show. Liz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and why you are on our Paralympic season of programming?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Like, that's such a loaded question. Tell us about yourself. Well, I am Australian. I feel like I'm constantly having to say, please don't hate me for that now that I live in the UK, or I've been living in the UK for 12 years now. But yes, I was a Paralympic swimmer for Australia. I swam at 2 Paralympic Games, then 96 Atlanta Paralympic Games and the Sydney 2000 Paralympic Games, which were my home games, which were, in my opinion, the best games ever. I don't say that too loudly in the UK because everyone reckons the London Games were the best ones, but I don't know. Yeah, so that's kind of my sporting background. I guess, very, very stereotypically Aussie being a swimmer. Yeah. I literally think we come out of the womb just knowing how to swim in Australia. So and I really love my sport. And once I retired at the very old age of 21 from swimming, yeah, I kind of went on and, well, really wasn't sure what to do. I think for a lot of athletes, there's always this big gap between retiring from your sport and then finding what is your next journey or adventure in life. And it took me about 2 or 3 years to kind of figure that out. And I went to university and I did a bachelor's degree in fine arts and then a master's degree in philosophy, majoring in fine arts. And then it was off the back of that I moved to Leeds in lovely northern England and became an adopted Yorkshire lass.
I was going to say, that must be quite a culture shock. Australia to Leeds.
You know what I find? I actually think there is a similarity in sense of humour between the between the Yorkshire people and the Aussie. I think we've got a bit of a dry, self-deprecating kind of sense of humour.
Yeah, I can see that about the Northerners.
Yeah, and it's the same with Aussies. You know, we like a bit of the underdog, and we like to joke about ourselves. And you know, am I allowed to swear on this podcast? We take that piss out of it. I'm just going to swear anyway. We take that piss out of ourselves. You know, it's the way you do it. So I think, you know, it was more a weather shock as opposed to a culture shock.
Yes.
So yeah, I moved to the UK originally to study, but then I got halfway through my PhD and stopped it because my supervisor was a bit crap. So I didn't want to.
That's exactly what happened to me. Halfway through it, and I went, I can't do this. There was no disability support, and my supervisor was certainly not what you would call a feminist.
Yes.
Yeah. We have spoken to so many disabled people who've said, "Oh, well, I started my PhD and then stopped because of academic ableism."
Yeah, it's common. Yeah. It's
how dare we have dreams?
How dare we? Yes, that we can actually go to university and achieve something academic and intellectual. You know, yeah. So I quit my PhD and around the time it was the London 2012 Games, and I used to do speaking in schools in Australia when I was swimming, and I was kind of left with like, I need to earn money somehow. So I basically started hawking myself out to schools and saying, do you want someone to come in and talk about the Paralympics? And of course, people lapped it up because it was around the 2012 Games. And so I really built a career the past 10 years on speaking, basically a speaking career. And that's kind of shifted and changed and wandered. You know, I used to do a lot of speaking about the Paralympics, and then I started doing a lot more around well-being, even started a business with some friends around running kind of positive psychology workshops in schools. And then sadly my mum passed away, and that really made me think about moving back to Australia. So my friend and I folded the business down, and then, hey, look, I'm still here like several years later. But from then on, I started doing a lot more work around disability awareness in schools, because I think it's actually really important. I think disability doesn't get talked enough about in schools, and so I'm really kind of promoting that in schools, as well as diversity and inclusion. I think two very important topics. And now, because of the pandemic and I couldn't go in and speak anymore in schools and stuff like that, I did a massive pivot during the pandemic, and I'm now the editor of 3 disability focused magazines. This time last year, I would not have dreamt that this would be where I am right now. So that's me in a very quick nutshell.
that is quite a journey, because you know, you see, I see people on Twitter. So me and Liz have been connected on Twitter for quite a while, and we've sort of like known of one another from a distance. And I've always wondered, like, how has Liz gone from Paralympic swimmer to editor? Like, they are 2 completely parallel, like different worlds. So it's quite interesting to find out people's journey, you know, of how they became like advocates for disability and all that kind of thing. I find it fascinating how people just sort of pick it up and land with it. And actually, for disabled people, it is I have spoken to many disabled people who've actually said, you know, it's talking about what they know, isn't it, really? That lived experience. Nobody can take a lived experience away from you. So, and you know, everybody else writes me off, so I might as well talk about what I know and that I'm knowledgeable about. It's really interesting for me. So
yeah, it's so true. And I think it's interesting because one of the magazines that it's a startup magazine that I've been brought on as editor called, okay, sorry, not COVID. Every time I cough, does anyone else feel the need to say like, not COVID? Excuse me there. Yeah, one of the magazines that I've been brought on as it's a startup is called Not Your Monolith, and it's a magazine where the main focus isn't necessarily content that's talking about disability, but they only employ disabled creatives or writers, or a team to actually create the magazine. And and it's called Not Your Monolith because it's about recognizing that we have this depth of lived experience, but we're not each other's monolith. And I think that's, when I do go in and do disability awareness workshops in schools and stuff like that, I'm so clear about, this is my experience, but hey, here's some tweets from people with different experience, someone with a visual impairment, because I can't understand, that person's experience, or, someone who's a wheelchair user, or someone who's neurodivergent in some way. But it's so important, I think, to be so clear about that, because I think disability, we get so boxed into this particular idea of what disability is, but I think it can be so different for all of us.
Well, and that sort of fits in perfectly with kind of our brand, and what we're trying to do is just show that there are so many different labels, but we've all got different voices, we've all got different stories. So that's very on brand, Liz. Thanks.
I got the memo, right?
Yeah. It's like somebody's prepped you beforehand. We haven't, ladies and gentlemen.
I was going to say, we are not organised enough for that.
No, it's not at all. We're called lABLEd Podcast, but we actually hate labels, because the labels that society puts on us, they mean nothing. It's the labels that society puts on us are things to make society feel better, because they think they can understand it, whereas we don't like them at all, really.
So I think that there's a push from society to feel like they can understand. If they put a label on us, they understand us, and that makes sense, and that's where we fit. Yeah, and it makes them more comfortable with our existence.
It really does. And this is why, and I know certainly I've read posts about Disability Pride Month where people are like, it's okay to not feel pride and so on and so forth. But for me personally, the thing I really like about Disability Pride Month is that it's us taking control, or a bit more control of the label, and saying that actually we can be proud of our bodies and our minds and what they can do for us, and how it is coming back to that lived experience. These are our lives, literally. I don't want to, oh God, it sounds like the Sophie from the US, Days of Our Lives. We should start one about disability, right? Disability, Days of Our Lives. But you know what I mean? It's like we can't. I think that's the issue with labels, is that people have to understand is that we can't just then take. We can't take our disability off. It's not like, it's literally not like, okay, I can take my prosthetic leg off at the end of the day, but I'm still limb different, and and that's my lived experience, and that is my everyday life. And you might have these beliefs about what my abilities are or what I'm capable of, but that means nothing to my actual lived experience.
No, I completely agree. Go on, Alice.
I was just going to say it's so interesting for me having Liz on the show. So there's a lot of different. As you've been talking, Liz, I keep thinking, oh, I want to say this. Oh, I want to say there's a hot. So when
Alice, can I just say, play it cool. All right, mate, it's fine. Calm down.
Hey, Alice, I fart and pee as well. Okay?
This is like Alice's equivalent of beating Mickey Mouse. This is like, I'm so excited.
I've been to Disneyland. I've met Mickey Mouse. This is more exciting. So when I was a kid, I did a lot of swimming. It was basically my weekends were my mum would take us to the swimming pool. She would just drop us off, and I think I told my 6 degrees of Chris Evans story to you, Luce, where the reason that I would be able to hang out with Captain America at 6 degrees is because I used to swim with Hugh Laurie's kids. But I loved swimming. I was a huge, and then when I was probably 9 or 10, I broke my left arm, and I'd always had breaststroke. And after breaking my left arm, even now, it's weirdly still quite weak. So I could stop being able to swim in a straight line. And then coupling that with my sight getting a bit worse and stuff, and I'd had chronic ear infections, and swimming stopped being something I enjoyed because physically it was hard. And a lot of that hung on the fact that I had a disability. And I can very much remember watching the swimming would have been probably 96, 2000 and 2004, around sort of while I was, 10 and 14, seeing people like Liz. And there was a big, and I've sort of talked about this on the show before, but for me, there was quite a big gap in my identifying as a disabled person, and even really understanding my disability and my own kind of needs, right up until my late teens. So during that period of time, I was seeing great athletes doing the sport that I loved, that I didn't feel like I was able to do anymore. And I think looking back, one of the things I'm really realizing now is that a lot of the problem with the reason I had to stop was because I didn't recognize my own disabled needs. I think perhaps people around me didn't either, and didn't know how to meet them. And if they had been met, I could have kept swimming, and I could have kept doing the thing that I really genuinely loved. And so, seeing disabled women out there doing it and still doing it, even though they've got a disability, I think, at the time I was a kid and I didn't really understand why that resonated with me. But that's why it's, for me, this is quite special having Liz on the show, because I can remember sitting on the floor in the living room in the house I grew up in, watching swimming in the Paralympics, and just being moved, and it meaning something to me in a way that I didn't really understand until really now. So I think what I'm trying to kind of lead us to.
It's honestly like that makes me quite emotional, Alice, like hearing you say all that, because honestly, for me, I think as disabled women, we all grow, especially the teen years, I think are always super hard. Because there's always, even before social media, there was always this social pressure to look a certain way, to be a certain way, and if you don't fit that, then you're not going to fit in, basically. And I think for me, I was 13 when I decided I wanted to swim at the Paralympic Games, and that was when I met my wider Australian Paralympic family. And I went from living a life where I was literally the only disabled person I knew, because I went to a mainstream school and no one else in my family at that point had a disability of any kind, to suddenly having this big family with all these people with so many different types of impairments and conditions, who were loving their life, who were really fit, really healthy, really invested in achieving this particular goal that they had, that I shared with them. And it suddenly showed me, I think, possibility. But for me, it's what I always try to get across, is that it's possibility beyond just sport. It was also showing me that if I'm capable of achieving this, then I must be capable of achieving more. And people who maybe say I can't achieve anything, then they're lying, basically. And that's what it gave me, that confidence to know that I could do something positive in this world and achieve that if I wanted to.
And I think the thing that really strikes me from that story is the community element that you found. You found a community that is outside anything. As somebody, I've got an entirely able-bodied family. Also, I passed for non-disabled a lot. I went to a mainstream school, so that element of my disabled identity was something I really didn't understand or even see kind of reflected in the mirror, never mind in the people around me. So that idea of a community, I think, you know, the fact that you found that in your the sporting community, I think that's the thing that's the most important thing, I would say, for anybody.
Yeah, I think as well, finding a community. I mean, for me, I'm not one bit sporty at all. I wish I was. I'm just
It's
not.
fine, Lucy.
My attempt at swimming is ridiculous. The lifeguard thinks I'm drowning every time I attempt to swim, even though I'm swimming. But that's another story. But when I started school, I was 3 years old when I started at a special school. That was for children with disabilities, because way back in the 90s that was like the only option. And then there was a big push for inclusion into mainstream settings when I was a bit older and a moody teenager, and I said, I'm not going anywhere, all my friends are here, why should I move like this? And but I definitely felt like a sense of community. And also when you're growing up and you are going through that transitional period of getting used to, oh, so I'm disabled and things are different for me, you know, when that penny drops when you're about sort of 9 or 10, maybe having that sense of community and being around other disabled people, where the disability that other people had isn't an issue. You just get on with it, don't you? And you're all like, there's a common goal. I think that is something that has really stayed with me, because you know, I grew up not having to worry about what other people thought of Lucy in the wheelchair, because everybody else there was like, you know, George with the hydrocephalus and all this kind of stuff. And so you just got, so, you know, like, oh, Louise is in the corner having a fit during maths, don't worry about it, she's fine, that kind of thing. She's well looked after, rather than, oh, this is really different. We weren't different to one another. We were just like normal in brackets kids. And I think that stands you in good stead. Once you find your tribe, it's finding your tribe, isn't it? And going, okay, so we are, you know, we are a community because we are different. I think there's something extremely comforting about it, really comforting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, honestly, like I've probably kept in contact with one person from high school, but I've kept in contact with nearly everyone who was on the Paralympic team with me. And it's nothing against the kids I went to high school with. You know, I had some really good friends there. But I think that there's that extra bond where it's not just that you're traveling with that team constantly. So, you know, you do have to get to know people really, really well in that space because it's very intense. But at the same time, there's that connection around disability, the ableism that we all experience, and being able to talk about that with each other, and that I just did not have with my friends at high school, because they were all non-disabled and they would have no understanding whatsoever. And in actual fact, they were guilty of ableism in some ways, like not that they were aware, not that even I was aware that it was ableism at the time. But certainly, you know, that community and those friendships that I developed through the Paralympic swim team. I mean, one of my best friends, Janelle, she was on the swim team with me. We were the two youngest on the team, and we used to room every time we'd travel. We would always room together, and I'm now godmother to her two eldest kids. We've stayed in touch, even, you know, while I've been living here in the UK and she's in Australia. And every time I go back to Australia, we catch up, we go away for a few nights together, and you know, there's bonds there that just, unless you're in the disability community, there's no way you'll get what that bond is.
Yeah, definitely. And it's and it just, you know, one of the things that was a bit bizarre to me when we sort of started arranging for you to come on the show, Liz, is that I have these memories of like seeing you on TV and seeing, you know, you're a Paralympian with 2 medals, and I'm like, oh yeah, just chatting to me on Twitter. Like, it's a little bit like,
you'd be appalled at the way I treat my medals, flipping heck.
Really?
They're in the suitcase at the moment.
I'm very surprised, actually, Liz, that Alice isn't. Alice isn't outside your door going, "Can I try your medal on, please? Can I try it on? How heavy is it, really?"
Well, you know what? When we meet face to face eventually, I'll bring them with me. Although a lot of people say, like, Ben, I'd wear that as a necklace. Yeah. yeah, but it's kind of, you know, when I go and speak in schools, quite often the kids ask me, "Oh, where do you keep them?" And I tell them I keep them in a magical cave in a mystical forest where no one can find them. And I'm like, "Yeah, really? They're just in the suitcase in my room." It's like, no, to be fair, I love my medals. I'm very proud of them, but it's you know, I'm like, I know they're there. I don't need to see them all the time.
Well, I think it's probably a very fine line to walk, isn't it? It's like when you visit somebody and they've got all of their degrees mounted on the wall, and you're a bit like, I know you're very proud of the fact that you went to university, but do you need to have it hanging over your dining table so that I can't have a cup of tea without it going, "Hey, look, all of my degrees"?
I was considering hanging a picture of, you know, our artwork, Alice.
Yeah.
Like a poster of our artwork on the wall, just so people walk past and go, "Oh, what's that? That's the podcast I co-host. Would you like to rate and subscribe?"
You know what? Hang it in the bathroom. The amount of Oscar winners that I've heard, like actors, that are like, "Yeah, I'll just keep my Oscar in the bathroom on top of the toilet," and it's like, okay.
To be fair, I think I would. I think I would probably do that. I'd keep BAFTAs and Oscars and everything on the toilet where you can't avoid it. It's in your eye line, whether you look at it or not.
It's also like the bathroom is the place that I lock myself away and cry. So it would be nice to have my Oscar to be like, "Oh, you're not doing so bad after all, are you?"
Well, when you win your first podcast award, because no doubt you will start winning podcast awards.
Knock on wood.
That's when you'll have to put it pride a place in the bathroom somewhere. Like you'll have to maybe take turns, unless you both get like a statue or something.
Yeah.
I
think if we ever win an award for our podcast, I will just spend the rest of my life crying about it because
this is a bit of a rare episode, really, for me to be the one that gets emotional. It's usually Lucy. Lucy's very much the crier on the team.
We hit a big milestone. We hit a big milestone for the podcast, and me and Alice have a little meeting between ourselves, and I always end up crying. I'm like, oh dear, come over all unnecessary. It's ridiculous, really.
You know what? I cry at the drop of a hat. You know, watching TV shows, watching ads on TV. I'm like, "Wah!"
No. Yeah, it's becoming a running joke, really. There we go.
I mean, even watching the Olympics, like when Tom Daley and Matt Lee won the gold in the oh my god, I was sitting there eating breakfast watching it, just going while I'm trying to eat my cereal. It was like, oh, I'm so proud of them.
Do you feel like you're rooting for Team GB, or do you feel like you should be rooting for the Australian team?
Oh, okay. You know what? If an Aussie's in this sport, I will always go for the Aussie. But Team GB will be like my second choice. So it's like if I'm watching it and the Aussie's winning and I'm like, yay! And then, yay, Team GB's come second! But you know what? If there's no Aussie in it, I'll definitely go Team GB all the way. And you know what? Like, because there are some Aussies in the diving, and I did watch it this morning. And but you know what? I think Tom Daley is just an absolute legend in the diving world, and
something
I think
a bit special about him.
Yeah, there is. Like, I mean, the fact he's sitting there knitting away on his Olympics cardigan to wear. I'm like, oh my god, I love you. It's like, yeah, I just think you know, because I know that there is an Aussie in the final for the 10-meter platform. Which we'll all know who the winner is, because as you say, people are listening from the future, so we'll know who's won it. Hopefully Tom will have won it, because I will be cheering for Tom in that. So even though there is an Aussie in it, so
you see, for me it's Adam Peaty. Because Adam Peaty comes from Staffordshire, and he trained in the same swimming pool where my sister learned to swim. And I would like to say that it's a prerequisite of being from Staffordshire that you're a good swimmer. But as I've just said, I swim like a drowning fish. It's quite ridiculous.
You know what, Lucy? If it makes you feel any better, I can't run to save my life. I look like I'm doing a cross between a skip, a gallop, and a limp, basically. It's very
Right,
strange
okay.
looking run. So
Yeah,
you know what? Can't run to save my life.
Is it like when Phoebe runs in Friends?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a bit like that. Like, and it's a bit of a gallop and a bit of a
Well,
Yeah.
and I can't ride a bike,
Well,
Liz. So, whereas you spend all of your life on a couple of wheels. So,
I used to be quite good at boccia when I was at school. Boccia, but I can't throw for toffee, so they gave me a drain pipe, half a drain pipe, to roll the ball down, which isn't very exciting, is it really? I was like, yay! I can point a drain pipe at a target. Congratulations.
Well, boccia is at the Paralympics, Lucy.
yeah. One of the things that I think's really prevalent and I think really cool that's kind of coming out of the Olympics this year is a lot of people are talking about mental health, and a lot of people are talking about the impact of that intense, I think, public gaze, as well as that, you know, the intensity of the performance and the work you have to do to get to that level of performance for the Olympics. You know, what's your sort of thoughts on all the things that are coming out and that people are saying? Is that something that resonates with you, Liz?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, when I was swimming, it was in the 90s, and mental health just wasn't spoken about in sport. We had a team psychologist, but the psychologist was there basically just to help us with our mental preparation for racing. It was nothing to do with, you know, are you feeling anxiety, depression? Are there any other mental health issues that you might have that we need to address? How do we prepare you once you leave the sport? I mean, like I said, I had at the beginning, I had that gap between retirement and starting university. And I'll be really honest, there was about 2 or 3 years there where I literally felt so lost. I had no idea what I was meant to do. And, you know, when you're an elite athlete, a lot of the times, you know, you're focusing on your sport, and in the meantime you're making sacrifices in everyday things that everyone else is cracking on with. So, you know, by the time I retired from sport, I had friends who'd almost finished university degrees, friends who were starting to get promotions in their work already. Some people had managed to even save enough money in like 2 years. How the hell they did it, I don't know, but save enough money in 2 years to buy a house. And I'm literally just like, I feel like I'm a baby, and I'm just starting out into life after swimming. And there was just no preparation of that, or understanding of that, or support, or anything that you got. And it is starting to change more and more. I know certainly in Australia, the past few years, they've really put a focus on mental health, but I still think, you know, there at that point there was a long way to go. And I think it's especially, you know, obviously, you know, we're going to bring up Simone because Simone is the one that's kind of really, I think Simone and Naomi. Oh gosh, what's Naomi's last name again?
Naomi
Osaka.
Osaka.
Osaka, that's right. That, you know, they're talking the way that they're moving forward around mental health is that their mental health comes first before anything else. And actually that is the way that it should be, because I mean, you know, when I was a swimmer, I remember being poorly. Now this is like you know, physically poorly. I had a cold, and I was actually here in Britain for the British Nationals down at Sheffield, and my coach, I remember the head coach basically saying to me, so it wasn't even my team coach, it was like the head coach, the guy in charge of all of it, and he was like, "You're swimming," and I'm like, you know, snotty, coughing, sneezing, gross.
The last
disgusting.
thing you need is to just get wet.
The last thing I want to do is get in a pool with blocked up sinuses and try and swim 100 meters front crawl. Like, who does that? But no, you're getting in the pool. Now I did. I got in the pool. Now the irony is I did actually swim a personal best time. How the hell I did that, I have no idea.
You were just desperate to get out of the water again.
That was absolutely it. But afterwards, I actually got sicker, and I, you know, in the end, the head coach, like the team doctor rather, actually said to the head coach, she can't swim anymore. She's like too sick. But I see that it should be the same with mental health that and Simone Biles really showed that these Olympics, where she was like, you know what, because it is that thing. If Simone had COVID, if she'd had the flu, if she'd had a cold, if she'd broken a wrist or sprained her ankle or something like that, she would have pulled out and been like, you know what, this shit happens, right? Why can't it be the same around mental health? And I think that's the powerful thing that she did, was go, well, my mental health is just as important as my physical health, and if I can't do this, I'm not doing it.
No.
So I applaud her for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particularly as well, the year we've had, you know, everything has been topsy-turvy. I applaud anybody who has gone, do you know what, my training regime has been upside down. I don't know, like, I've been swimming, I've been practicing my swimming stroke in a paddling pool.
But you know what, that's the thing, I can't even imagine. I felt for them so much, because
I know,
because when you're training for the Olympics or Paralympics, you literally have your 4 years are set out to perfection. You know what races, you know where you'll be traveling to race in what nationals for preparation, making sure you're getting enough international competition in, enough national competition in, that your cycles of training are going to fit in, and that, and everything is aimed towards that Olympics or Paralympics at the end of that 4 years. And these athletes have been working to that 4-year program to suddenly have this pandemic happen, and then be told, well, it's going to be postponed till next year. But then even at the start of this year, still not knowing, is it actually going to go ahead? I can't even imagine the psychological pressure that would have put on all of them, really.
No, I really do applaud anybody who's gone, do you know what, I'm going to, like, we'll go, I'm going to go, like, we're going to do this Olympics. After all of that setback and uncertainty, to even be there, never mind winning a medal, you congratulate. They should get a medal for just going to Tokyo.
That's true. You showed up. Congratulations. Hello. Here you go. Have a medal.
It's made of tinfoil, but here you go. You know, it's not surprising, is it, really, that they've gone, do you know what, my mental health, you know, I think maybe it's the climate we find ourselves in, and how important mental health has been over the last 2 years, nearly.
But you know what, I really hope that in terms of sport, it's going to see a lot of change. But I think that moves beyond even just sport. I think in society in general, we've had so many changes happen because of the pandemic, and it sounds awful to say, because this pandemic has been absolutely awful and traumatic for everyone. I will honestly say, I think everyone's experienced, like, we've all experienced collective trauma around this. But it's like looking for those positives. And, you know, we certainly know that a lot more businesses now are talking about, well, how can, it's like, finally, hallelujah, how can we implement flexible working into our workplace? How can we allow for people to work from home more? How can we include mental health and well-being days in terms of our sick days, and so on and so forth? I think those discussions are getting bigger and wider and stronger, because people recognize that we're not robots, we're just human beings trying to live this life. And so whether it's in sport or work or community or activism or whatever, we need to have those strategies in place and that support in place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can even see in the, you know, the short space of time between Naomi Osaka making her sort of statement and decision to withdraw from her sport, and then Simone making the decision to withdraw from the Olympics, is the press coverage has gone from, oh my God, look at this, she's, because of her mental health, and there was a lot of, I think, public backlash, to then there's been, and maybe, you know, it's not, certainly not as come as far as it ought to have done, but it has only been 6 weeks.
Yeah. We've got to give the press time to catch up.
but there has,
we've got to give Piers Morgan time to calm down first.
But there is I think there has been a shift in people recognizing that, actually, you know what, when Simone came out and said, as you said, Liz, you know, I need, my mental health is as important as my physical health, people sort of went, well, yeah, actually. And I think that's really important. And I think, I mean, there's still, you know, some of the things that people were saying about Naomi Osaka and some of the things that were trending were really upsetting. But then the support that was trending out there for her as well was really moving, I think.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the things that hopefully, if nothing else comes out of this, individuals feel more able to hold their hands up and say, this is something I've had difficulty with, this is something that, you know, should be talked about, even if, you know, the press and businesses are slower to sort of pick up.
But we certainly know, you know, it's like that, it's almost like, you know, there's the bell curve in terms of change, cultural and social change. And you know, you could certainly look at people like Naomi and Simone as being, they're the revolutionaries, they're the change makers at the start of that curve that are stepping up and saying, no, enough is enough. This is how we want our sport, our life to be like, and we want to protect our mental health in relation to all of this. And you know, it's just, I think that is the start of what is going to be some really revolutionary change around mental health, not just in sport, but certainly in wider society.
It definitely takes like a handful of people to be the one that goes, okay, this has got to stop. And I'm taking a stand. And it takes a handful of people to do it before everybody else starts to go, well, Simone did it.
Yeah.
Naomi did it.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I mean, you know, let's bring it back to Tom Daley. I know, you know, but him knitting, I think for me, it's like, I love that. But you know what? I wonder at a deeper level how much that was actually about his own mental health and managing, kind of his nerves and his anxiety and his, you know, just to do something that is almost meditative and repetitive and something else that he could focus on aside from his sport. I honestly, I've been really thinking that the past couple of days when we've seen him sitting there knitting. I'm honestly sitting there going like, I bet that's to do with your mental health, mate, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, something so that instead of sitting there and waiting and knowing that you've got all of these people watching, that's something else to focus on. I really, that really resonates with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I've said this many times before, Alice, you know, during the lockdown and the pandemic, not being able to go to work, having the podcast is really something that helped me because it was a distraction. On the days where I felt absolutely awful, Alice would go, do you fancy doing XYZ for the podcast? And I'd get it done, and I'd throw myself into it, and it'd be a distraction. I still do it now.
Yeah.
But having that coping mechanism is really important. And so what if it's knitting? Knitting might not be cool. Doesn't matter, does it?
I knit.
So long as you enjoy it. Yeah,
I knit, I embroider, I'm really crafty. I grew up in a really crafty family, so it's like it was inevitable. But for me, certainly, it's like I know if I need to get off, if I've been working too much and I'm starting to feel a bit anxious about work and I've been on the laptop for too long, and it's like, okay, I'm going to just pop some music on and go and sit down with my embroidery and sit there for a couple of hours and just embroider and make something beautiful or something useful or something. I think, it is so much about that getting out of your head. And I think having some kind of hobby or something like that to focus on just, definitely really helps with that.
And I'm a massive fan of meditation. I meditate all the live long day if I could, to be honest, because it's like I feel calm. It's all right. I'm going to drink some peppermint tea and everything's all right. It's fine.
See, I think my biggest thing, and it brings us sort of back onto topic. My biggest thing that I always do that I find really helps with my mental health is running. I like to just get on a treadmill. I've got a playlist of music that's like big girl-based pop. So it's a lot of Little Mix. And Beyonce and Taylor Swift. Yeah,
you love a bit of Taylor Swift.
I do love a bit of Tay. And I just run, and it's everything else gets switched off, and that's a really nice for me to just let the rest of the world kind of go away and be in my body a bit, which is something I think. And so I think again, going back to the kind of talking about mental health and sport, I think it's really interesting that there is, it's almost like there's a sort of a line at which people start, people are always going, oh, exercise, it's so good for your mental health, it's so good for your mental health. And then when people start putting expectations on you and pressure on you and labeling you as an elite athlete, as a sports person, it takes the fun out of it and it puts the pressure on, and it stops being a thing for yourself.
Oh, honestly, the amount of people who I was in squad with who they'd get to about 15 or 16 and they'd quit the sport. They'd just be out of there. And it would be for a number of reasons, whether, it was because they wanted to focus on their schoolwork, or they discovered the opposite or the same sex, or they just had enough. They just didn't love or enjoy. So one of my other really good friends, she was a really good swimmer, and she left the sport purely because she didn't enjoy it anymore. And for me, I'll be honest with you, I retired when I did. I probably could have easily have gone on another 4 years. I was certainly young enough to do so, but I wasn't as in love with the sport anymore. And there's no point forcing, or I don't believe there's any point in forcing yourself to be getting up at 4:30 a.m. every morning to go down to a pool for 2 hours when you're not absolutely loving that sport. What's the point? So, there certainly has to, I think that's the thing with elite sport. There ends up being this expectation that you're there to perform for the public. And what the public have to remember is that, no, you're there to be the best that you can be in your sport on that day. And if that means you come first, you come first. If that means you come 8th in a swimming race in the final, you come 8th. If that means you just swim a personal best time, that's great. That's every time I swam, that was all I aimed for. I was like, if I can just swim the fastest version of this race that I've ever swum, then even if I come 8th, I can walk away happy. And I think that's what so many people outside who aren't elite sports people have to remember, is that elite sports people are human beings as well. And all you're trying to do is to be the best sports person that you can be.
And I think it's really important as well to kind of, for those of us sitting outside and watching, and I always think this when my dad or my brother are watching rugby or football and criticising people, and I sort of want to go, oh, go on then, you have a go. Let's see how well you do. And I would like to see, Susan from accounts who's sitting there.
Susan's back.
Who's sitting there bad mouthing Tom Daly because he's not concentrating on the race because he's knitting, and so he doesn't come first or whatever.
He's not swimming whilst he's knitting. I mean, that deserves like a platinum medal, never mind a gold.
That you then, you have a go, Susan. Let's see how you do. Sink like a stone.
Come on, Sue. Get your cosy on.
It's like, come on, Susan, I'll take you on. Let's go. Let's meet down in the pool.
Yeah. Liz, the one thing that I'm really interested in, because nobody ever really talks about it, or I've certainly have never heard any sports person talk about it, but the decision for you to go, okay, do you know what? I think I'm done here. Like, is that like an overnight thing? Are you like wrestling with your is it keeping you up at night? And how do people react? Like your coach, for instance, when you say, I've really had enough of this now, I think it's time I stop and go and do something else. What is there a level of, please come back, I love you, that kind of thing?
It is like a little breakup. It is a little bit. Oh, you know what? The thing is, I'm still in touch with my 2 coaches that I had, so it's like we haven't fully broken up, not yet. But yeah, it's kind of, you know what? I'll be honest with me, and I think it's different for everyone, really. But for me, I was 13 when it was announced that Sydney had won the right to host the games, and I remember turning to my parents and saying to them, I really want to swim at those games. And so the Sydney 2000 games, because they were my home games, they were just my absolute focus through all the several years that I was training. Even when I went to Atlanta, I looked at the Atlanta Paralympics as a bit of a test run for the Sydney Games. Like, that was the way that I was looking at it, which seems a bit ridiculous now looking back, but it's the way that I did look at it, because my whole focus was on the Sydney Games. And I knew probably that I would retire after the Sydney Games, but up until about a year beforehand, I kind of still wasn't 100% certain. I thought, I might continue on another 4 years. I might see how I go, and so on and so forth. But about a year out, I kind of made that decision, because I knew that my world standings at that time were good enough that I was pretty confident that I would make the team. I mean, obviously things can happen, so you might not, but my times and everything and my world standings, and I was pretty confident I'd make the team. So I'd kind of taken that pressure off myself, and was like, could really then think about, did I want to continue on? And I think I realized that no, because I was looking at my friends who were kind of having all these other life experiences that I couldn't have, because I was too busy training, or I was too tired from training, or I was trying to study at the same time as training. And I just, you're trying to cram so much into your life. And at that point, your focus has to be your sport. It always has to come first. And I realized that I didn't necessarily want that for another 4 years. So I told my coach, I think, I talked before about maybe retiring after the Sydney Games, and I told my coach, and he accepted it. Good old Ross. Love you, Ross. But I would be lying if I said he didn't try to talk me out of it sometimes. Certainly in the months leading up to the Sydney Games, he'd just drop it in conversation every now and then. Do you want to have a think about it again? I think you could easily go on another 4 years. I think we could really get your times down even further. And ultimately in the end, I just didn't want to do it. My heart wasn't in it anymore like it used to be. And honestly, the amount of training that you do, like, your heart has to be in it. You have to want to be there 100%. And if you're not, it really is that there's no point. And I was at the Sydney Games 100%, but I knew as soon as I swam my last race, I'd be out of that pool, and like, that's it, not 100% anymore. And that's what happened. So I went out, partied after my last race, got drunk.
Don't blame you.
Go piggybacked my friend's boyfriend back to the athletes' village. She was in a wheelchair, and my legs were sore, so that's why Joe gave me a piggyback. It's all good. There's nothing dodgy about it.
No, it's always fascinating me, like because when they say, "Oh yeah, I'm just I've retired" or whatever. I always think to myself, I wonder what that conversation behind closed door, like, please don't go. You're the best.
Yeah, I mean,
you're the best sports person I've ever trained. Please don't leave me.
Oh, well, my coach Ross certainly always told me I was the best swimmer he ever coached. So I don't know whether he was just trying to butter me up all the time. But certainly, those conversations do happen. I remember there was an official, Anne. Oh God, I'll never forget Anne. I had such a love-hate relationship with her. But she was trying to talk me out of it. I did have people seriously trying to talk me out of it. But you want to hear the funny statistic about the Sydney Games? After the Sydney Paralympic Games, 3/4 of the Australian Paralympic swim team retired. It was basically everyone was just holding on for these home games, and then we were like, we're out of here.
I'm knackered. Stop it.
It's enough now. You can get new people to torture from now on.
Yeah. No, it's it always, that sort of stuff always fascinates me.
Do you still swim, Liz?
Not so much here, because I'm going to sound like a real pool snob here and say I don't like many of the pools in the UK. They're not as good as the Aussie ones. But whenever I do go back to Australia, so my dad's partner, she does a lot of swimming, and Leslie's always like, do you want to hop in the car with me? And I'm like, yes, please. And then I realize how unfit I actually am these days. So I barely make it to a kilometre. I'm like, I'm gonna not be able to get out of the pool. But which is par for the course, I guess you might say. it's certainly different. But I think I would like to get back into swimming. I think for me, it's a sport that is a lot easier for me in terms of my disability. So I've tried walking and hiking and stuff like that, but I get sore backs and sore legs and shin splints and all that yucky stuff, and blisters because my prosthetic. Ugh, I hate it. So for me, I think swimming really is the best sport to keep fit. So it is something I would like to get back into, and not at that level, obviously. But
you're not making a triumphant return back to the Paralympics.
This is the big announcement.
You want to hear context, right? Right. This is context. So. Oh, why am I swear it's Friday, isn't it? Friday we're recording, and I've got complete and utter brain fog. But Paralympian Ellie, what's her last name?
Oh, Simmons, Ellie Simmons.
Ellie Simmons, that's it.
Yeah.
I swear I'm just can't remember. Today seems to be the day for me not remembering last names, right? So she swam at the London Games. And she was the same she's the same classification as I was, so an S6. And she won the gold in London in the 400-meter freestyle. Now, that was the race that I won my silver in Sydney. So literally 12 years after I won my silver in Sydney, she won the gold in a time over a minute quicker than what my time was.
Wow.
And we were the same classification.
Whoa.
So there's no way I'm making a comeback because there's no way I can catch up to that time.
Wow.
That is crazy, isn't it?
It is. I think it just goes to show how far Paralympic sport has come. I mean, we certainly started getting treated a lot more the same when I was swimming as the Olympians and getting that support. But I think it's certainly shifted a lot. I know in Australia, definitely, and I think it's similar here in the UK. But the Olympians for quite a long time used to get funding through the government. So if you were like in the top 8 in the world, you would get a certain amount of funding. If you were in the top 16, you'd get some funding, like not quite the same amount as the top 8, but you'd still get some funding. And Paralympians didn't. But now the Paralympians do in Australia, and I believe it's the same here in the UK now. And that funding obviously really helps because it means if you do have to work, you might then be able to just work part-time because you're getting that funding and support, which, I certainly didn't have at all. And I was just really fortunate that, and I do recognize my privilege and in this, that I had parents who were able to afford to support me while I was training and to pay for my training and stuff like that. And be able to drive me to competitions and stuff like that, because certainly there is privilege in that, because there are a lot of very talented young sports people out there whose families perhaps can't do the same for them. So I think there's been a huge shift in the support that Paralympians get, and I think we really start to see that in the times and how fast some of the Paralympians are going. I mean, I absolutely blow kids' minds when I tell them that it's predicted that not long to go, probably in a few years, let's say 5 to 10 years, Paralympic runners with the amazing technology going into prosthetic legs will be faster than non-disabled runners.
That's
and you should see the kids go like, what? And I'm like, yeah, they're going to be faster than Usain Bolt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, eat my dust. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's like, we disabled people kick ass. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
We're going to see little kids like, oh, Mum, I'm just going to saw my leg off because then I'll run faster.
It's true.
Just below the knee. Just the knee. I like just stop at the knee.
Yeah.
It's true. It's so true.
I love that.
I always think though that I always like at this point of the Paralympics, at this point of the Olympic season. So just as the Olympics are finishing, and we're getting quite good at the Olympics. So I think at the moment, when we're recording this, I think we're 4th in the medal table.
I might check that because I know Australia's up around there too.
Oh,
so it's like competition time.
When I heard yesterday we were 6th, but that was yesterday. A lot changes.
But you get to this point of the Olympics, and I'm like, right, stand aside now, peasants.
Thanks for testing like the pool and the track and that for us, but we're ready to step in now.
Yeah, just watch. just watch this. Like, if I was a Paralympian, I would definitely wear a crown and be wanted to carry around by like hunky, burly men that can just lift my chair, so I don't have to carry that.
You'd be going, sorry, Tom who? Tom
Yeah,
Daly who?
Who's that? Who's that again?
Yeah. No, and if I would have gone,
what?
yeah. Excuse me, I'm from Staffordshire as well. I know that if I won a medal, I would be insufferable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. She still talks about when she worked at the BBC 10 years ago.
True story.
Toast be proud of that, Lucy, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the things in our I think it's our very, very first or possibly our second episode. Lucy talks about when she worked at the BBC, and Lucy has a bit of a bee in her bonnet about words like inspiration. And when we first met, she also has a tendency to go, people go on about Paralympians. I'm not an inspiration. I'm not a Paralympian. I'm just doing what I what I want to do. And I can remember saying to her, Luce, do you know how impressive it is working at the BBC? It's like you're sitting there going, oh, everybody goes on like I've done something amazing, like I'm some kind of Paralympian, and I'm so inspirational. It's like all I did was work for the BBC, and I'm like, Luce,
it's the BBC. Yeah. Lucy, own it.
It's very hard to see myself as an inspiring individual when all I did most of the time at the BBC I spent fighting with the photocopier and calling people from IT going, can somebody come and sort this out because I've made it worse.
Oh no.
Somebody will be with you in an hour and a half or 2 hours.
You know what though, Lucy, you just gotta leave that bit out. You just I work at the BBC. You should serve me, get down on your hands and knees and kiss my feet.
Well, I'm sure that there are elements of being a Paralympian that is the Paralympic equivalent of standing by the photocopier going, why won't you work? But then you also go around going, two medals actually, a bronze and a silver Paralympian actually.
My neck feels really heavy because I carry medals all the time.
Yeah.
Well, to have the glamorous, you've got to have the unglamorous stuff as well, right?
Absolutely. No, it's I always say, I'm not a Paralympian, because I think as well there is a tendency for non-disabled people there is either you're a drain on the society and you don't do anything with your life, or you are a Paralympian. And if you're somewhere in the middle, like I contribute to society, but I'm not a Paralympian, why am I not, why?
You know what I absolutely hate is when, because I know this has happened to quite a few probably a lot of disabled people, to be honest, but they get told by non-disabled people, why don't you go and do the Paralympics? Yeah. And my answer to those people is always this. I'm like, if you're a non-disabled person, why don't you go and try out for the Olympics? Yeah. I'm like, does every non-disabled person want to be an Olympian? No. Does every disabled person want to be a Paralympian? No.
No.
Yeah, exactly. It's I was once coerced by one of my PE teachers at school because he thought I would be good at sport. Spoiler alert, I'm not.
Not a spoiler alert. Lucy, you've made that very clear.
I mean, I do resemble like a small sack of potatoes, to be honest. I'm not at all fit and trim and anything like that. But yeah, and I'm just like, no, you'd be really good at this sport. We went to the Alexandra Stadium to do it's like track and field stuff, and I came last in my wheelchair race, but I still got a medal because I was the only person in my age category. So I don't know how that really works. And then I ate too many Jaffa cakes, made myself sick, and went home. I had to go home early because I got really bad sunburn on my shoulders. Bye, everybody.
That's a very Lucy story.
And my friend, who was actually quite a really good runner, he was just looking at me, shaking his head as if to say, "I can't believe. Look at the state of you. You're covered in Jaffa cake. What's wrong with you?"
Well, to be fair, Jaffa cakes are damn delicious, right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, Do you have Jaffa cakes in Australia, or is that a delicacy that you discovered while you were over here?
That's the only reason she's still here.
It is pretty much. It's true. That is true, Alice. Actually, it's the thing that is keeping me here is the bloody Jaffa cakes. They're beautiful. No, we don't have them in Australia. I mean, we have other things. So like in Australia, my favorite chocolate. It is a Cadbury chocolate, but it is actually a Cadbury one that you can't get here. It's called snack chocolate, snack bar chocolate. And it's like all different flavors. It's got that, like, you got pineapple flavor in there and orange flavor. Like, it's probably full of absolute sugar and shit, right? But it's so tasty. Oh my God, I love it. And I can't get it here. But on the flip side, yes, back in Australia, can't get Jaffa cakes. So it's a conundrum.
I don't think British people like fruit very much. It sounds suspiciously healthy to us. So they're like, no.
It's literally probably full of palm oil, sugar, and fake flavouring. So, all the good stuff for my body.
Yeah. No, it's I wish I was sporty, because I do look at these people and I think, my God, that is quite amazing. I mean, my mom will jokingly watch things on the telly I can remember the last time she did it jokingly. There was a man on the telly who solved a Rubik's Cube with his mouth.
Ooh.
And my mom just looked at me and went, he got no arms. And my mom just looked at me and went, look, see how lazy you are. Like, to be fair, you're right there.
But to be fair, I use my disability all the time to get out of stuff. It's like, my housemate, hey Liz, can you wash this up? Oh, no. My back's a bit sore today. I've got a blister on my prosthetic leg. I can't do it. I just can't do it. But it's like, yeah, I probably could, but
because I jokingly said to somebody once, I like to, occasionally, to get out of things, I will play the disability card. Anybody who is disabled and tells you I don't play the disability card is lying.
100%.
100%, because everybody does it. And this person I was saying, I jokingly said, sometimes I play the disability card. And they went, is the disability card an actual thing? And I went,
we keep it in our back pocket.
I just whip it out, when I'm in restaurants. I need my disability discount, thanks. I wish we had that.
That would be amazing. You get a discount for however much, like if you're missing some leg, that's how much discount you get off.
Yeah, that's true. I'm missing half my right arm and half my right leg. I deserve a 50% discount. Then
absolutely.
Exactly. But no, this person actually went, is that like a proper thing? I was like, no, it's not like a ration book.
It's like, I'm collecting disabilities, don't you know?
Collecting disability points.
Disability bingo.
Yeah. That's a good name for a podcast, that Alice. Disability bingo.
There was, I have, it's 100% my, I'm stealing it from another organisation. We should probably cut all of this out because I want to do it at some point in the future. But there was like a benefit or something in the States, and a disability advocacy charity was like, this is going to be 90 minutes of, it was like one of those telethons that they have, and it was going to be 90 minutes of people going, oh, how sad is it for these disabled people? They've got this terrible life. And so they had like an online bingo for whenever somebody said something that was...
hear about this.
Yeah. Yes. I was like, yes, that sounds brilliant and hilarious. But you'd also you turn it into some kind of drinking game.
Yeah.
That would be great.
But you see, it's like things like children in need. So over here, Liz, you probably know about children in need.
I do, unfortunately.
When I was a kid, we were taught to, you should support children in need because it's helping children like you, and being aware of other people's differences, which is fair enough. But now as an adult, you kind of go, oh, this is a bit icky.
I have real mixed feelings about children in need, because Children in Need funded some of the first mental health services that I made use of, and that's the thing that is the work they do for people in economic strife and families. That is a big deal for me. But as you say, as a disabled adult, I'm also a bit like, can I pick which parts of children in need I donate to, and you don't fund this bit, you only fund the bits that I like?
Or make it even better, why don't they get some disabled adults on the creative team and the production team who can actually maybe make it not icky? So you're still raising the money, but you're doing it in a really non-patronizing, non-icky way. That's a simple fix as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, releasing a song in Age of Children in Need, which is a rework of Coldplay's "Fix You," is just like, whoa, hang on.
I don't need fixing, mate. Seriously.
No. And you know, when I worked for the BBC for a while, for about 3 weeks actually, I was put on Children in Need, like their appeal desk, because they were running short of people, and I was in charge of handing out the Pudsey Bear suits in the Birmingham area. See, it's not all glamour, is it, Alice? You see what I mean? Did you know that Pudsey Bear actually has a code of conduct?
What?
That he has to.
I can 100% believe that, because you know some weirdo was wearing a Pudsey Bear suit and he got his cock out.
Just took a very unsavoury turn. But there's a thing. He can't take his head off. He can't be left unattended. He can't scratch his arse in public. And I was like, this is a so I use that as like that is peak pub quiz knowledge. That's stored away inside my brain. But and you know, you'd ring up the charities that they fund, and they'd be so grateful for the money. So in that respect, like Alice says, you know, you have to applaud them.
But I think it just comes back to that representation, doesn't it? It's and this is why I say, you know, it's so important to have disabled people on, like, in the production team and stuff like that, because, or in the creative, like, you know, generating the ideas. What are we doing for children in need? Do we even necessarily need that name? Can we change it to something else? Can we make sure that we're kind of like, or just being really careful around that representation that we're actually showing? And I mean, you know, to be fair, I see it, you know, even with like Stand Up to Cancer and stuff like that. I mean, I think there's certain ways of doing things which can be problematic, but they don't have to be. No. There's always alternatives that you can do. But I think society at large is so stuck in this general idea of how we should talk about disability or illness, and it kind of really is not reflective at all of the actual reality of it.
I think so much of it is that people see the disability and they think that is the be all and end all of our lives. That's it. That's all we ever want to talk about. All we ever want to, you know, that's the only thing you're ever allowed to ask us is about what happened to you then. And not the fact that, you know, what are your hobbies? You know, what's your favourite drink in the pub? What can I get you to drink? What's your favourite food? That kind of. Nobody's interested in the minutiae. Like, where did you get that nice dress from? It's like everything must be about disability, and therefore, because it's such a big part of your life, it must be the only thing you want to talk about, and it's not. And I think that again is part of the problem.
And it just sorry, Liz, go on.
No, go on, Alice.
I was just going to say, it just continues to kind of segregate people and label people as different. Like, you know, you only want to talk about your disability because that's the only thing about you. You're different from me. The only thing that you want to talk about is how different you are from me. And that, to sort of bring it a little bit back to sport, some of the stuff that you've just been saying has made me think a little bit about, and it's not perhaps not something a person that disabled sports people really want to herald as someone to be proud of. But, you know, you look at Oscar Pistorius and his choice to run in a non-disabled race, because for him it was not about his limb difference, you know, it was about the sport And actually, I think that's quite important to recognise that what he was doing there. And one of the things, you know, that I think is similarly to the children in need thing is the slightly difficult kind of the taking the kind of the good and the bad element of it with, you know, the Paralympics, as amazing as they are and as amazing as the contestants are, it is separating these people because they are different. And so they're and I appreciate that, you know, for lots of disabled sports people, their experience of sport is going to be different from non-disabled people, but also it's just driving home that, you know, to the audiences who are sitting and watching at home, these people are different.
Yeah, I think we really saw that in with the London Games. I know that a lot of disabled people, you know, the Channel 4 calling the Paralympians superhumans, it was very contentious, that title. And you know, whereas the Olympians didn't get a special name like that. No. And I think that's the issue. For me as a swimmer, one of the biggest frustrations would be, you were kind of just being seen as, oh, you're amazing just because you're getting in there and having a go. And it's like, no, hang on a sec. I work as bloody
just hard
as those Olympians do. I worked my butt off for this. And that's not being recognized. You're just like giving me a pat on the head and saying, oh, aren't you clever for having to go in the swimming pool? It's like, no, I worked my bloody butt off for this, and I want to be recognized for that. If you want to call me inspirational for having that dedication to a sport, to actually achieve that elite level, not because I'm doing sport and have a disability.
I can't remember, Liz, when you swam and competed, did you wear your prosthetics?
No. I think I'd sink to the bottom of the pool if I did.
If Liz wore her prosthetics, she'd swim like me.
And then I'd messed up. I'd be like,
they give you like special ones that are basically like armbands, but like, you know, so they're just rubber filled with air, so you float.
No, my butt's big enough. That helps me.
My mum always says that my boobs are big enough to save me if I start drowning.
But it's interesting because it's I do get asked that quite a bit, actually, if I did ever wear like a prosthetic limb in the pool and stuff like that. But and I think it's interesting to see, especially when I'm in schools and I'm showing them a video of my silver medal winning race, and quite often it's like they watch the race and then it's like, yay, you won the silver medal, and then they're like, at the beginning of the race, why were you on the diving block, and why did that lady start in the water, and why that, and why that? And it's kind of, you know, trying to explain to, you know, especially non-disabled people, or even to a certain degree disabled people who maybe aren't into sport like you, Lucy, or the Paralympics or anything like that, which is completely understandable. But like in the pool, we don't use any other assistive aids. So, you know, unlike the track athletes that get these really cool, amazing prosthetic legs, we just have to use what we got, right? To swim as fast as we can.
Yeah, it's just sort of the reason I ask is because obviously, you know, and I imagine the technology is out there, if you wanted to use a prosthetic in the water, you would your limb difference would be less of an issue. So surely, you know, again, similarly to Pistorius, you could compete with non-disabled athletes. And there is a part of me that sort of wants to say, well, you know, if that's a possibility, you know, if I were a swimmer, I'd need a guide swimmer, but you know, but actually in terms of my limbs and my physical sort of outside body, I don't have a physical disability, I have a sensory disability. So, you know, is there a future, is there a world where disabled athletes and non-disabled athletes are competing together because those differences and those different needs are changed and taken away?
The line becomes blurred.
I don't know if that would be possible for everyone. So when I think of the swimming pool, so you know, in Paralympic swimming, you've got the different categories. You've got S1, which you know, is kind of the more severe impairments and conditions, through to S10. So S1 to S10 is physical disabilities. So S1 most severe, S10 least severe physical impairment or condition, and then you've got S11 to S13, which is visual impairment. I think that's right. S11 to 13. And then before the Spanish basketball team, intellectually disabled basketball team, stuffed it up in Sydney, where half the team weren't intellectually disabled, and got the classification kicked out of Paralympic sport, there was S14 for intellectual disability.
Whoa! Hang on. Back up a minute. What?
Yeah.
You know the story.
Huge controversy at the Sydney Paralympic Games. The basically half the Spanish Paralympic intellectually disabled basketball team were made up of basically people who tried out for the Olympics but didn't get in. So like they basically just were like, oh, we'll put you in the Paralympic team because why not?
So they pretended to be intellectually.
Yeah, and they won the gold. They did win the gold.
Right, I'm sorry, my camera's turned off, but I am. What?
Yep. It's true. Look it up, everyone. Look it up, Lucy.
Oh my God.
But you know, there's, you know, certainly in swimming, when I think of the S10s with least severe impairment or condition, these swimmers already in the pool are almost as fast as their non-disabled counterparts. So, you know, I remember Justin, who was on the team with me, he was an S10, and I'm sure, if I remember correctly, he was down to like about 23, 24 seconds for 50 meters freestyle, like front crawl.
Oh my God.
So he was literally
that's made me feel a bit sick.
Far off. And his condition or his impairment was he'd lost a foot in a farming accident, I think. So he was a lower leg amputee. And he was almost as fast. Now, no doubt, I mean, this was obviously going back over 20 years ago now. So they're fast. They definitely for sure are faster now. So I think, you know, I don't think that can be achievable for everyone. I think even if you did bring in certain prosthetics or supports that could help. So I don't think you're ever going to have a world necessarily where we can completely mix people. I don't think in terms of fairness. I mean, we know already that there's issues around classification in the Paralympics already, and certain examples of unfairness coming out. And even when I was swimming, there was a girl in my classification, or I shouldn't say girl, there was a woman in my classification who at the Sydney Games who won a lot of our races, and then by the next Paralympics, even though I wasn't competing, I heard that she'd been reclassified up a classification, which means less severe impairment or condition, but she didn't have to hand her medals back or anything like that. So you know, there's certainly issues of fairness even within Paralympic sport. So I think that's the danger of if you start to kind of try and include disabled athletes in non-disabled sport. I think there's just going to be a few more issues around fairness and.
No, I think it's a really, that was kind of what I wanted to sort of explore a little bit, because I think it's an interesting conversation that happens a lot around inclusivity in general as well, is that there's that obviously including people, non-disabled people, wherever is possible, you know, in mainstream, quote unquote mainstream society is really important. But there are also elements of, and I guess this is me showing my sort of true colours and my feelings about the social model of disability, is I feel that there are some ways in which there are no reasonable adjustments that are ever going to take my disability away and are never going to make me be able to be fully included physically in a society because of my disability. And it's just, I think it's important and interesting to have these conversations, because I think that, you know, as much as saying, you know, what Pistorius did was, I think, important. for disability kind of awareness.
We're talking about the sport
Yeah,
there, not anything else.
Not the
That's the
murder.
other thing that he did.
No, I mean, what that
my heart did a bit of a flip there, Alice. I was like, let's just clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I think what Pistorius did to his fiance is very important, and that's why he's in prison. Or house arrest. Is it house arrest now? They didn't.
I think it's house arrest now.
Yeah, that's
because he tried to play the disability card.
That's another.
That's when you shouldn't get away with playing the disability card.
No, I was going to say that. I think that's another episode in of itself. But yeah, I think it's just it's a very interesting topic. I think there's a lot of different facets to it, because I think it's really important to try and promote inclusivity and representation of disabled people in the mainstream. But I think it's also really important to recognize that there's an element of, when you talk about fairness, actually the unfair element of it is making sure that those disabled people have their needs met, and that they're supported and given the extra support that they may need that a non-disabled athlete wouldn't.
Absolutely. And I totally agree. I think that has to play out across society as well. It's why, when I was saying earlier that looking for some of the positives that come out of a pandemic, such as that we're in and around flexible working, being able to work from home more, and having those supports that perhaps is actually more enabling and empowering of disabled people to do work, or in the case of the Paralympics, do sport. I think for me that the main aim with Paralympics should really be about getting that equality of recognition with the Olympics, so that you have the same levels of Paralympians getting sponsorship from big brand companies, that they're being seen on the TV as much as the Olympians, that they're being recognized for the hard work around their sport, not defined by their disability, or that they're overcoming, like I'm saying this in quotation marks because I hate the word overcoming. They're not overcoming their disability to play the sport. They are just sports people who are working their butts off to be the best sports person that they can. And same as the Olympians, and just having that equality of recognition, I think is important.
I think I'd like to see the Tokyo, the swimming games, and you have your divers and you have your 400 meters and stuff like that, and then you, instead of having that separate, this is the Paralympic Games, wouldn't it be nice to just have, and now we're going to have the Paralympic 400 meters, and because there is something, I mean, it's kind of cool that we're like, hey, look, this is our game, but also
stand aside, bitches.
But also, there's going to be a change in audience and stuff like that for people who are choosing to not watch the Paralympic Games because they don't need to see disabled people doing stuff. And I think there's a lot of different options to explore there, and yet we're still stuck on being called superhumans.
I am bracing myself for the next 2-3 weeks of, you should try that. You should. Like,
I know.
And you just think, can you just leave me to eat this Ben and Jerry's on my own? Because I can smash this in under an hour.
I was going to say, that's how Paralympics
win the Paralympic gold in Ben and Jerry's ice cream eating. So sure.
And also, I am the world champion at musical chairs. Never lost a game ever. So Liz, that's great. So can we ask you, what does the future have in store for you, Liz, and with your magazines and your editing work? Because it's really interesting to learn about that, and I think our listeners will be really interested too.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about disability representation. I always have been, actually. When I did my fine art degrees in uni in my 20s, I really focused on exploring the visual representation of disability, kind of really tapping into that authentic lived experience, which I think is so important. And like I said, I'm editing 3 disability focused magazines. So one is called Disability Review Magazine, which is my first experience in editing a magazine in my entire life. When they rang me up and said, we want you to edit our magazine, and I'm like, I've never done any editing at all before. Yes, I'm a writer. I've done some writing before, but I've certainly not edited. No, we want you. So I was like, who am I to say no? Right. And but I'm always up for a challenge, and so I did say yes. And what I discovered is that I'm actually quite good at editing magazines, and I actually really, really enjoy that process of connecting with disabled writers, disabled creatives, and really curating and cultivating something powerful for disabled people, to really feel seen and reflected in the magazines that I'm producing and editing. And so Disability Review magazine was the first, and when I started doing that, I had actually started a publication on Medium called Conscious Being, and I decided that I was that good at editing, right, that I just actually turned Conscious Being into an actual magazine. So I started working on that earlier this year, and we launched our first issue in June. June. And we're making, I know I kind of, oh God, this year's gone so quick already, right? It's just overwhelming. but and in the meantime, while that was happening, I was asked to come on board with a startup magazine, Not Your Monolith. And they're all I see them all as very different magazines, but all important in their own right. I feel like Disability Review magazine is very much kind of your stereotypical kind of like lifestyle mag with, like, coming back to using that word, but inspirational stories, informative pieces, advertorials, things like that, where maybe from the disability industry you might be having people like, get this chairlift, it's amazing, or get this this adaptation in your car will make you drive even better, kind of thing. Like that's very much DRM, and I love the magazine and I love the team behind it, but it's kind of very different to the other two magazines that I edit. So Not Your Monolith, like I mentioned earlier, is very much about employing disabled creatives, but not necessarily having that disability focus in terms of the articles. Whereas Conscious Being, which is the one that I created, it's very much by and for disabled women and non-binary folk. So really want to just for me, with Conscious Being, it's so much about that authentic voice and story and getting that representation out there, and really talking about issues that we all have, and not the whole, like, what non-disabled think of as disability issues. So, not necessarily medical all the time or anything like that, but, just the day-to-day life crap that we all have to put up with sometimes, or that we experience, or the successes that we have, or for example, in issue 2, which comes out in September, I did an interview with Indigenous Indonesian disabled women who are doing amazing work around climate change in the global south, and now there are voices that are very, very rarely heard, but I think they deserve to be heard. I think they need to be heard. Right through to Jenny Greenberg, who's written for us before, who's written an amazing article about how a time she spent in a psychiatric hospital, how music therapy helped her connect to her grandmother who had mental illness as well. So it's just really kind of ensuring that there's this, wide range of representation and voices, and that being heard. To me, that's really important, and that's the wonderful thing about being an editor, is that I feel like I've had my time in the spotlight, and now it's time for me to use the platform I have to lift up other disabled women and non-binary folk, to kind of say, everyone, you need to listen to these people because they've got something important to tell you and something important to say, and that could really challenge you, make you question everything, make you think about life and the way that society's structured, and actually maybe be that call to action for you to make positive change for all of us.
I think that's really cool. And you can subscribe, pay a subscription for the Conscious Being, can't you, so that you can get
so that's
we'll put all the
we'll put
all the details on our episode
Oh,
guide.
that would be
for your
awesome.
episode.
Thanks, Alice. Thanks,
Yeah.
Lucy. And the exciting thing with Conscious Being is we did a poll the other day on social media, and apparently people want a print version. So keep your eyes peeled.
Ooh.
We'll be doing a print version soon.
Amazing.
Well, if you want some cover stars,
I've already got you guys down. I will admit, I'll be honest, I am actually reviewing the Dope Black Disabled podcast for this second issue, but your podcast is definitely going to be reviewed for our third issue. You're on the list.
Can't wait for that. That's brilliant. No, great. Liz, it's been absolutely a joy to speak to you. I feel no longer frightened of Paralympians. I'm not comparing myself to a Paralympian anymore. It's brilliant.
We're not scary.
It's not scary at all. I think Alice has calmed down now.
I have. Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like a weird, crazy stalker.
I would check your bins. I would check your bins.
I'm just going to go change my phone number now.
Change your email address.
Yeah.
No.
I'm not.
Yeah. Check your bins before you go to bed, just in case she's in there.
I did mention I lived in Leeds, right?
Thank you so much for your time today, Liz. It's been an absolute joy and a pleasure.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Alice, so much. It's been so much fun chatting with you both, and actually getting to speak to you face to face. Like, social media is amazing, but nothing beats this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And guys, if you've enjoyed this week's episode, please make sure that you go off and you rate and review and subscribe. You can donate to our GoFundMe, and tell your friends and all of those things, because we want everybody to hear what we've got to say. I think that's us done, Luce.
I think so. I'm going to go to the pub now.
Oh, very nice. Have fun.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see everybody next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the lABLEd podcast. If you like the show, please rate, review and subscribe. You can follow us on social media at lABLEd podcast.
Our thanks go to our editor, Adam Hall, our music composer, Maisie Crunden, and our graphic designer, Sarah Coley.
We'll see you next time.